everyone! So today we'll first begin by going over the different parts of the Rotovap. So right here is our water bath, and you turn it on by hitting this power button, and you can see the green light come on, and you adjust the temperature using this knob. Right, turn it off. And this is where your sample connects to the Rotovap, and you always use a cat clamp to clamp it on. This is the bump trap that connects to your sample, and then the bump trap connects to the machine. You can raise and lower the machine using the lever arm. First you have to turn on the power to your actual Rotovap, and then you use this button to slide it up or down. And then you use this knob to adjust the rotation of your sample. And you can see here, the bump trap and the sample are spinning. Okay. And over here, we have the cap for the condenser. This whole apparatus is the condenser, and this is the collection trap. This right here is the vent for the vacuum, and you adjust it by turning it either down or up to the tube that goes to the vacuum or to the outside environment. So now, before you even begin rotovapping, you have to turn on the cold finger. This back here is the cold finger, and you turn it on by flipping the switch, and the green light comes on. Then, you grab the plastic black piece right here, and you take the cap of your condenser off, and you put it right next to your machine, and you put the cold finger right in. And sometimes this will break the seal, so when you do turn your vacuum back on, you want to make sure that you press this down because the weight of the cold finger will knock it off. And you want to leave your cold finger in about 15 to 30 minutes before you begin rotovapping. And you have to make sure to feel the outside of the condenser to make sure that it's cold before you begin rotovapping. Okay, so after you turn on your cold finger, you'll want to turn on your vacuum aspirator so that you have vacuum and suction in your Rotovap. And so I'm going to use this one, it's number 2, because if I look back on my machine, that one's labeled number 2 as well. So first you have to remove this lid, it just comes right off, and you look inside and you have to make sure that the water is above the 2 metal tubes. If it's not, just fill it right up. And then to turn it on, you flick the switch in the back. Don't worry, it's the only switch. So you turn it up, and then to turn it off, you flick it back down. And then after a while, the vacuum aspirator will get hot, so you can feel the water on the outside, and you'll have to add ice as it gets warm. So we're going to turn it back on so that we can use it. Right. So the last thing to do before you begin rotovapping your sample is to check the water level in the water bath. It should be about 1 to 3 inches from the top, but really the best way to check it is to bring your sample down, and you want it to be slightly submerged in the water, but your bump trap cannot hit the metal part. So this could use a little bit more water, which you will do, but you just don't want the glass to hit, so it all depends on the type of glassware that you're using. Okay, so now before we put our sample in our round bottom flask, we have to inspect it to make sure there are no cracks. So first you want to look all around the neck and the joint. That's just a little piece of dirt. And you check all around and you inspect the bottom as well. You don't want any stars or cracks or anything that looks suspicious. Alright, so this one's all set. As we were saying before, it's really important not to have any cracks or stars in any of your glassware because the system is under vacuum, and if you have any cracks or stars, it could cause the glass to implode, which means broken glass, and that's very dangerous, and you just don't want it to happen. So it's easier to prevent an accident just by looking at all of your glassware and making sure that there's nothing wrong with it. So now you can fill up your sample in your round bottom flask. And it's really important, your sample cannot be more than halfway full because you're going to put it on its side and you don't want it to come back out. So we're going to hold it, and usually if it's in the white area, that's usually around halfway, so that's a good indication of how full. Here's where our sample is going to go, and you put it on, and then you take your Keck clamp, and there's a shorter side and a taller side, and the taller side goes on the side of the sample. So you click that on, and you make sure that this top part is above the lip and it's actually on and holding it on, and that's how you attach your sample. Alright, so now that we have our sample attached, you can finally begin to rotovap. To begin rotovapping, once you have your round bottom attached, you turn on the power to the machine, and first you turn on the rotation. And I keep my hand on the bottom of the round bottom flask because the vacuum isn't turned on yet, and if the vacuum isn't turned on, then this could fall off, even though you have your Keck clamp on. So you really want to turn up your rotation because that reduces bumping, and that's something that you do not want. And then you turn on your vacuum, and you can hear it in the hood, the aspirator start to activate. And I always push down on this top part so that the seal isn't broken. Alright. Don't be afraid to crank up your rotation because that really helps reduce boiling and bumping. You can adjust the height of your sample and bring it down into the water bath. And if the water temperature is not warm enough, you can turn the power on and adjust the temperature that way. So how the Rotovap works is that you have your sample, and basically you want to boil it so that it goes up here, and then you want it to go into a liquid again so that the liquid waste goes into the trap and your solid product stays in there. And how we do that is by putting it under vacuum, it lowers the boiling point, and by rotating it, it increases the surface area. So it becomes a vapor, and it goes all the way up here, and then it hits the cold finger, and it condenses back down, and you can see it dripping on the inside right off the tip of the condenser. And when you have dripping, that means you're rotovapping successfully. Also, you want to put ice on your collection trap, or else it will reverse the equilibrium and it will vaporize in here instead of become a liquid, and it will go back this way. So to do that, we simply put our collection trap in a bucket of ice to keep it nice and cold in a liquid state. So some troubleshooting tips for rotovapping. First of all, if your sample is not dripping, clearly this one is, but if yours isn't, what you can do is lower your sample down into the water bath, and after a few minutes, if that doesn't help, you can turn on the power and turn up the temperature. If your sample is boiling inside of the round bottom flask, it's not always a bad thing. It just means that it's going into a gaseous state really quickly. If it's just a little bit of bubbles and it's under control and it's not too crazy, that's okay. You just want to watch it. But if it's really vigorously boiling, you are at risk of bumping. You'll see it really boiling actively, and the liquid starts to shoot up here and it goes into your bump trap. And so to stop that, you keep your rotation where it is, you don't turn it down, and instead you turn your vacuum to halfway. So you can see the little hole right there is halfway in between fully on and fully off. And you don't have to hold on to the bottom of the round bottom flask because it's still under vacuum, but it's not pulling out the liquid, and that will really help reduce bumping. And if your solution is still boiling and still bumping, then you can turn it all the way off, and you remember to vent slowly. But since now that your solution is not under vacuum, you do have to put a hand on the back of your round bottom because it's only being held on by the Keck clamp. So you know when you're done rotovapping by looking at the condenser, and you can see that there's really not much dripping off. There's just one drop that went down, but there's really nothing left condensing on there. So we're going to lift our sample out of the water bath and turn the rotation all the way down to 0 and flick the green switch off, and I have my hand on the bottom while I slowly vent the vacuum. And it's really important to go very slow venting the vacuum so that everything equalizes pressure and we don't have any explosions or implosions. Okay. Alright, so now you can just pull off your clamp and you take out your sample. Sometimes you have to twist the joint a little bit and you're all done. So we'll put the sample right there and then we'll go and turn off our aspirator. You flick the switch down, oops, and that turns that off. And then finally, you'll turn off the cold finger. You let this drain a little bit, and sometimes it makes a weird noise at the end. It always does that. Alright, and when that's done draining, you put it back in the holder next to the cold finger machine, and you replace the cap on top. Empty the ice bucket and take the liquid out of the trap and put it into the waste. And the last thing to do when you Rotovap is to vent the aspirator. So you can see I've taken off my round bottom, I've turned the aspirator off, and now to vent it, your vacuum is out to the environment, and I'm going to turn it down back to the pump. You can see in this pump, and you can hear it, the air escapes so that your tube isn't under pressure anymore. And that's really good and really important for the maintenance of the Rotovap and the aspirator. So now that it's vented, I'll just turn it back up and you're all done.